Hello and welcome. You're watching World Panorama with me, Ishan, the show that gets you all the big international news stories of this week. And these are the headlines that made this week. Relations with Pakistan touch a new low after diplomatic slap to Home Minister Rajnath Singh in Islamabad. Rajnath Singh tells Parliament that our neighbour is just not ready to change. India pulls out the stops to rescue workers stranded in Saudi Arabia without money or food. Union Minister General V.K. Singh tells cheering workers in Jeddah that their issues are being addressed. In Nepal, Maoist Party Chief Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda takes oath as the new Prime Minister. New government starts implementing pact signed with agitating Madhesi-based parties. And North Korea provokes again, fires ballistic missile into Japanese waters. South Korea urges neighbor to stop launching ballistic missiles, even as a focus on providing its citizens' livelihoods. Our big focus on World Panorama today. Home Minister Rajnath Singh on Thursday used the SAARC platform to target Pakistan over the Pathankot and the 26/11 terror attacks that were both planned and masterminded by Pakistan-based terrorist groups. Addressing the SAARC Home Ministers' Conference in Islamabad, Rajnath Singh said no type of terrorism or support to it could be justified and called for immediate and effective action against all those who support or encourage international terrorism. But it wasn't just his speech that added to the tension.
Home Minister Rajnath Singh on Thursday delivered a tough message to Pakistan. Indian media reports claimed that the speech was blacked out by the state-run Pakistan TV, which was the only media allowed to cover the conference. Responding to the Home Minister's tense 24-hour visit to Pakistan, Union Minister Venkaiah Naidu criticized Pakistan in Delhi.
That is Pakistan model of democracy. Pakistan model of democracy.
In Islamabad, addressing reporters after the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation Interior Affairs Secretary meeting, Home Secretary Rajiv Mehrushi informed that India will host the SAARC anti-terror meeting on September 22nd to 23rd.
India offered to host SAARC anti-terror meeting to be attended by various anti-terror forces of each country on September 22nd and 23rd, to which all countries agreed.
India has offered to train personnel from other SAARC nations in drug control activities. Among the issues discussed at the SAARC meeting in Islamabad, the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty to pave way for smoother extradition of militants and human trafficking was also discussed.
Based on a consensus, several issues were discussed during the meeting, especially terrorism. All the members were requested to give their approval for the establishment of SAARC Terrorist Offences Monitoring Desk and SAARC Drug Offences Monitoring Desk.
सभी देशों से निवेदन किया गया कि जिन देशों ने अभी तक इसके लिए सहमति नहीं दी है, वे इसके लिए शीघ्र सहमति दें.
Home Minister Rajnath Singh's visit to Islamabad also saw anti-India protests in various cities by globally designated terrorists like Hizbul Mujahideen's Saeed Salahuddin and 26/11 mastermind Hafiz Saeed of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, who is a free individual in Pakistan. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And we have in the studio Pramit Chaudhuri, Foreign Affairs Editor at the Hindustan Times. To help us understand, Pramit, was this along expected lines what happened at SAARC, the diplomatic snub as it's being called, or do you think that this time the relations between the two neighbours, especially India and Pakistan, at a forum, this is not a bilateral forum, really soured the entire forum?
See, the goal right now for both governments is to try to preserve the main SAARC summit, which will be in November in Islamabad, in which Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be meeting, presumably, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. The problem is that the Indo-Pakistan relationship, as has been mentioned, is not going very well. There's been the Pathankot attack, obviously nothing has happened on Mumbai 26/11. And on the Pakistani side, the present violence in Kashmir has made it very difficult to sustain or support engagement with India. So in effect, what I saw in the SAARC, in the Home Ministers meeting, was an attempt to ensure that the issue of Kashmir on the Pakistani side and the issue of terrorism and Pathankot on the Indian side did not ruin the summit, Home Ministers Summit, and therefore endanger the main summit in November. So what Rajnath Singh, our Home Minister, does is he goes there, he makes a speech against terrorism, but he doesn't mention Pakistan, he doesn't mention Lashkar, he mentions no names, he just says international terrorism is bad, although nobody can argue against that. He doesn't meet his Home Minister counterpart from Pakistan, and then he leaves. He doesn't even attend the lunch. So as a consequence, you basically have a meeting, a summit in which was the bare bones is reduced, as you said, just to the SAARC issues, which are multilateral and in which our bilateral concerns on either side are not mentioned. There was no one-to-one meeting with anybody. So if there had been a one-to-one, Kashmir and Pathankot would have had to be raised and caused as problems. So in the present circumstances, I think this is probably the best that the two governments could hope to do if they wish to preserve the November summit.
So in terms of a diplomatic club, it was more posturing on both sides, that both sides wanted it to be played out this way. But in terms of the entire fora, the fact that it was a SAARC Home Ministers Conference and a lot of other issues, and the fact that SAARC itself and its relevance, is it being reduced down to relations between India and Pakistan, or does SAARC as a whole move forward?
Well, SAARC moves forward in everything except India, Pakistan. So we've had some forward movement on South Asian trade. We've had India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal move forward to some degree. But yes, as an institution, the two biggest countries, India and Pakistan, don't get along. It's been very difficult for SAARC to move ahead. The issue is that if India and Pakistan, as and when they do function together and are in good relationship, then SAARC can move ahead very rapidly. Remember, SAARC was a creation not of India. It was a creation of Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, who wanted to provide a forum that allowed India and Pakistan to meet, but not necessarily get caught up in their bilateral problems.
All right, interesting point to make over there. But given what has happened, you think the Prime Minister's meeting in Pakistan in the SAARC summit later in the year, is that on the cards given what has happened right now?
Yeah.
And do we see further frosting of ties between the two sides till the situation in Kashmir improves, or till Pakistan calms down on terror, or cramps down on terror?
Hopefully Kashmir will be quieter by November. The terrorism issue will remain. I don't see any change. And the other third issue in this is the rivalry between the two in Afghanistan, where they're clearly at cross purposes with each other. So I don't expect any forward movement on the relationship, partly because while Nawaz Sharif and Prime Minister Modi have developed a certain personal relationship, Sharif is also very clear when he meets Modi that he has no power. He can't change anything on the India relationship. And India's overtures to the military have been completely rebuffed. Pakistani army has no interest in talking to us. So therefore, there should be no basis right now that I can see for any real India-Pakistan relationship moving forward. All that we can hope is that the two prime ministers will meet every now and then. And that, I think, is why the Home Ministers Summit was cut to the bone in an attempt to ensure that at least those meetings will continue, even if there will be no substantial progress in the foreseeable future.
All right, interesting point of that. Thanks very much, Pramit Chaudhuri, for coming in and helping us understand the issues between India and Pakistan in context of SAARC. Thanks so much for that. Well, moving on now, Minister of State for External Affairs, General V.K. Singh, on Thursday met Indian workers stranded in Saudi Arabia without money or food. Cheering workers greeted him in Jeddah as he reassured them that their issues were being addressed. A sharp drop in oil prices forced state spending cuts in Saudi Arabia. Construction firms have been squeezed financially and have laid off tens of thousands of South Asian and foreign workers. Indian officials informed that more than 6,200 of the stranded workers are employed by construction firm Saudi Yoga, a conglomerate that is owned by the family of former Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri. it has been unable to pay workers' salaries for months. The Saudi Labour Minister Mufrez Al-Hakbani said King Salman had directed officials to take all measures to resolve the problem at the government's expense, and Riyadh would hire lawyers to pursue the workers' claims and make sure that their rights were respected. Foreign Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj told Parliament that workers faced a food crisis because employers had not paid their wages. News now from neighbouring Nepal, where Pushpakamal Dahal or Prachanda of the Maoist Party was elected as the new Prime Minister on Wednesday, a week after KP Sharma Oli stepped down to avoid a no-confidence motion.
Maoist chief Pushpakamal Dahal, better known as Prachanda, was elected as Nepal's Prime Minister for a second time on Wednesday. The 61-year-old CPN Maoist Centre chief was elected Prime Minister with a clear majority of 363 votes in favour and 210 against him. Prachanda was backed by the largest party in the House, the Nepali Congress, the United Democratic Madheshi Front and other smaller parties. The Prime Minister promised to lead the nation towards economic development while working as a bridge between communities following deadly protests over a divisive new constitution.
There is no way to resolve the problems of the constituency of this country and the election-related issues without uniting ourselves. We are all in the same boat, and if it sinks, we will all drown. But if we sail across, we will survive.
Leaders of the three parties, Maoist, Nepali Congress and Madheshi groups signed a three-point agreement promising that the issues of Madheshis would be addressed with utmost sincerity and through constitutional amendment whenever necessary. However, the Madheshi parties will only extend outside support to the government.
We want a probe committee led by a former justice of the Supreme Court to look into Madhesi violence during last year's protest.
Prachanda, the only communist leader to become the Prime Minister of the country twice, took over as the 39th Prime Minister of Nepal on Thursday. Prachanda was earlier Prime Minister of Nepal from 2008 to 2009 before a disagreement with the military over his attempt to sack the army chief brought his period in office to an early end. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Time for us to take a short break. Lots more on the other side. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama. Now, North Korea once again provoked its neighbours and the international community as it fired a ballistic missile into Japanese waters. Japan called the action very provocative, while South Korea urged its neighbour to stop launching missiles. North Korea had warned of physical action last month after the US and South Korea had agreed to deploy an advanced anti-ballistic missile defence system in the region.
Defying the UN Security Council resolution once again, North Korea fired a ballistic missile early on Wednesday. The medium-range ballistic missile travelled about 1,000 kilometers from North Korea's western region into Japanese waters in its exclusive economic zones. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called the launch an unforgivable act of violence towards Japan's security.
I firmly protested against North Korea's unforgivable action, which is in obvious defiance of UN Security Council resolutions. Japan will deal with it resolutely and in cooperation with the US and South Korea.
South Korea urged its estranged neighbour to stop launching missiles, calling them a grave provocation to the international community.
It is a grave provocation to the Korean Peninsula and the international community. We expect the North to immediately stop it and put more efforts into people's livelihood.
Meanwhile, protests continued against the deployment of the advanced US anti-missile system THAAD in South Korea's Seongju County. Hundreds of protesters expressed their concern about the future and urged the government to withdraw its decision.
We will object to THAAD and retrieve our Seongju. I am nearly 90, but I have to sit here for my safety. It is just absurd.
Tensions are running high in the Korean Peninsula after the United States and South Korea agreed to deploy an advanced anti-ballistic missile defense system in South Korea. North Korea called it a provocation and threatened a physical response against the deployment decision. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Much else has unfolded around the world this week. Here's a roundup of all the other international news stories of the week in Globe Watch.
Japan marked the 71st anniversary of the US atomic bombing of Hiroshima on Saturday. On the occasion, city's mayor urged world leaders to follow in US President Barack Obama's footsteps and rid the world of nuclear arms. A peace bell told the time a US warplane had dropped the bomb in 1945. About 50,000 participants, including aging survivors and dignitaries, held a moment of silence at a memorial ceremony. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also pledged his determination to work towards a world free of nuclear arms. The United Nations has accused South Sudanese government troops and rebels of ethnically targeted atrocities during renewed fighting over the last month. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein said that preliminary findings showed that the majority of crimes, including extrajudicial executions and rapes against people of Nuer origin, were carried out by troops loyal to President Salva Kiir. Almost 300 people, including at least 73 civilians, were killed in the recent fighting. The Egyptian military claimed it has killed the head of the Sinai branch of Islamic State affiliate along with dozens of its fighters. The Egyptian military said Abu Dua al-Ansari, who operated the Ansar Beit al-Maqdis terrorist group, was killed in a series of airstrikes on fighters. The airstrikes targeted jihadist strongholds near the town of El Irish. Ansar Beit al-Maqdis terrorist group is Egypt's most active insurgent group and has been linked to deadly attacks in Sinai and Cairo. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a US citizen was killed and 5 other people were injured in a knife attack in central London. The attack took place in Russell Square on Wednesday. The victims injured in the attack were from the United States, Australia, Israel and the UK, while the slain American tourist was identified as 60-year-old Darlene Horton from Florida. Police arrested a 19-year-old Norwegian national of Somali origin. They say there is no evidence of radicalization.
Let's now shift gears and bring you up to speed with all the sports news you might have missed this week in our segment Sports Action.
The Court of Arbitration for Sport has rejected appeals against doping bans made by Russian weightlifters and rowers ahead of the Olympics in Rio. The International Weightlifting Federation excluded all 8 Russians who entered Rio last week, and CAS ruled that the ban had been properly applied. Appeals by 17 Russian rowers were also rejected at the hearing in Brazil. The court has now heard 18 cases since its division in Rio was opened on July 26th. The International Olympic Committee IOC has agreed to add baseball, softball, karate, skateboard, climbing sports and surfing in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. The decision was taken by the 129th IOC held in Rio de Janeiro. The organizing committee for the Tokyo 2020 Games proposed the 5 new sports in response to the new flexibility provided by Olympic Agenda 2020. IOC President Thomas Bach said Tokyo 2020's balanced proposal fulfills all of the goals of the Olympic Agenda 2020 recommendation that allows more sports to be included. World number 1 Novak Djokovic clinched his 4th Rogers Cup title with a straight sets win over Japan's Kei Nishikori in the final. Djokovic won 6-3, 7-5 in a largely commanding performance. The 29-year-old, who has won 7 titles this year, has beaten the Japanese on 9 successive occasions. Djokovic, who was beaten in the 3rd round at Wimbledon by Sam Querrey, will represent Serbia at the Rio Olympics. Manchester City have signed 19-year-old Brazilian winger Gabriel Jesus from Palmeiras for $36 million. Jesus has agreed a 5-year deal but will stay with Palmeiras until the end of the Brazilian season in December. He was voted the best newcomer in the Brazilian top flight last season and is part of his country's squad at the Rio Olympics. Jesus has scored 26 goals in 67 first-team appearances for Palmeiras and is the top scorer in the Brazilian Serie A this season, but is yet to make his senior international debut. Argentina have named Edgardo Bauza as their new head coach. The Sao Paulo boss will replace Gerardo Martino, who quit after the team's Copa America final defeat in June. Atletico Madrid's Diego Simeone and Tottenham's Mauricio Pochettino had been mentioned as potential candidates for the role. Bauza will now lead Argentina in their World Cup qualifiers in September, but will be without striker Lionel Messi following his international retirement.
A daredevil skydiver became the first to jump from a height of 25,000 feet, and that too without a parachute, landing in a net in Southern California. Luke Akins, 42, completed the jump in Simi Valley, landing in a net measuring 100 feet by 100 feet. We leave you with this. Thanks so much for watching.